Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to go over how I make my classic sourdough loaf. I know sourdough can be very daunting for people. There's a lot of steps and things you have to make sure you look out for. So I wanted to break those down and make this simpler for you so you can make your very own sourdough loaf. So the very first thing that you should do is you should feed your starter. I typically feed mine overnight, so I feed it just 1 to 1 to 1 parts water, flour, and starter. And then I will let that sit overnight for about 12 hours out on my countertop. And that's gonna activate the sourdough and get all those wonderful fermented bubbling microbes to show up. And that's exactly what you want to make sure that your sourdough loaf is going to turn out well. So the next morning, once your sourdough starter is all bubbly, you are going to mix your water and your flour together, and you're gonna let that sit for about an hour. And what this is going to do is this is going to hydrate the flour. This is called autolyse, and this is really going to activate the gluten within the flour. That way you will have a very nice structure for your sourdough loaf.
So here is where I am weighing out my flour. I just have 350 grams of all-purpose flour, as well as 125 grams of whole wheat flour. I really like to add whole wheat flour because it does add quite a bit of nutrients to your bread. And then I am just adding in my 325 grams of warm water and stirring that up. Then I like to go in with my hands and incorporate that thoroughly. That way you just know that the water and flour mixture is combined well.
Once that flour-water mixture has had time to set, you're gonna go in with your starter as well as your salt, and you're just gonna dimple that in with your fingers. And what this is doing is it's evenly dispersing that salt and sourdough starter throughout your mixture. And you're gonna let that sit for about an hour just to make sure those ingredients are well incorporated.
So here I am measuring out my sourdough starter. I am adding 100 grams of my fed sourdough starter to a bowl, and then I'm going to add that to my flour-water mixture. Next, I am going to weigh out my salt. I am weighing out 10 grams of salt and then dumping that into my bowl. And then here I am doing my dimpling with the sourdough starter and salt, and then I'm using my hands to thoroughly mix that all together. You can really work this dough here and make sure everything is thoroughly mixed throughout your dough. Once your dough is thoroughly mixed, you can take a tea towel and cover for an hour. Once that sits for an hour, you can uncover and start to do your stretch and folds. Here, I am making sure to get underneath that dough and pull up. That way, I know I am activating the gluten in the dough to get that nice structure.
After that hour is up, here is probably the most important step of making sourdough, and that is doing your stretch and folds. So I typically do my stretch and folds every 30 minutes, and I do 4 to 6 each time. And what this is doing is it's strengthening the gluten in your dough so you have that nice structured loaf. You'll know you're done with your stretch and fold process as soon as your dough has that nice glossy finish to it. After each set, make sure you are covering your sourdough with a tea towel and coming back and taking a look. And if it has that nice glossy finish and it's nice and smooth, you can move on to your bulk fermentation. Bulk fermentation can be picky and depends on the temperature of your house, except you don't have to pay too close attention to the temperature, but more of how your sourdough looks, especially when you're just beginning. You know that your sourdough has bulk fermented well if there is some bubbles coming off from the sides and it almost has a dome shape to the top.
So you can see mine is done fermenting because I have that nice dome to the top. So here I'm lightly flouring a surface and shaping my dough. I'm using this technique where I go in and kind of tie the sides together, and what this is going to do is it's going to pull that skin, if you will, of your sourdough, and it's going to make a nice firm loaf when you bake it. So now I am preparing my dough for cold fermentation. I am placing a tea towel into a bowl and placing my dough in that bowl and covering with the tea towel. Then I am taking a plastic bag and wrapping that tightly with a chip clip, and then I am going to place that in my fridge. The next morning, it's been about 14 hours and I am taking my dough out of the fridge and getting ready to score. So here I am just lightly flouring a surface and again shaping my dough into a nice loaf, and then I'm going to go in with a dusting of flour, and what this is going to do is it's going to really make your design pop. So here I'm just doing a simple cross hatch design as well as adding some leaves on the side. You can choose to either go in and do your own design, or you can just make some simple slashes in the top. This is just going to release the steam. I think it's really fun to play around with different designs here and kind of be artistic with it, but it's completely up to you.
So when you are scoring, I like to lightly dust the top of my sourdough loaf with some flour. And what this is going to do is it's really going to help that design to pop. This is definitely optional. You do not need to have these fancy scores for your bread. Although if you aren't going to go in with some fancy scores, I would recommend just making a few cuts and lines into your bread. And what this is going to do is it's going to help that steam release from your bread. That way you can get a nice fermented bulky loaf.
When you're ready to bake your bread, preheat the oven to 425 as well as place a glass pan in the oven. Then you're going to add some water into another glass pan to place underneath. What this is going to do is it's going to help your dough rise. For the first 20 minutes, you are going to leave your water pan underneath your loaf to help that dough rise, and then you are going to take out the water pan and bake for an additional 15 minutes to finish the bake. Once your loaf is done, I would recommend letting it sit for about 20 minutes or until cooled before cutting in.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit that like button below and subscribe. I'll be putting out more sourdough and health related videos, so come along with my journey for sourdough, and bye for now.